And church, it's so good to be with you. I'm so excited that it's Youth Sunday. I didn't realize that. So here's what I'm going to speak to the youth. I'm going to speak to the youth. So, you know, I grew up in the church. I grew up in 23rd Avenue Church of God in Oakland, California. And I learned that to really be true to the teachings of Christ, one must think of our faith as a verb, meaning that it is not only about our faith and our words, it is about our actions and our deeds. And I was raised by a mother who was very tough. My mother was all of 5 feet tall, but if you had ever met her, you would have thought she was 10 feet tall. And she would say many things, and she'd say, your life, if you are true to your faith and your belief about what is right and your power, and if you know your power, then you will live your life, whatever profession you choose, in a way that is about service to others. That you will understand that the greatest strength you have will be measured, and I'm going to now contrast it with some people now currently in the White House. Your strength will not be measured by who you beat down. Your strength will be measured by who you lift up. That's the sign of strength, who you lift up. My mother would say, don't you ever let anybody tell you who you are. You tell them who you are. She would say to me, because I know I'm saying this to you, she would say to me, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things. Make sure you're not the last. And I was telling Pastor earlier that the way I was raised like many of us were, that if you ever came home in our house complaining about anything, my mother would look at you with a straight face, maybe one hand on a hip, and she would say, well, what are you going to do about it? So I decided to run for president of the United States. But to keep my comments brief, I would like to say this, and especially to our young leaders. You must always remember your power to lead, and remember that you never have to ask anyone for permission to leave. When you are prepared to lead, you just lead. And you do that empowered by the love of Christ. You do it in a way that you understand your power. And remember always the teachings, including in the book of Luke, about the parable of the Good Samaritan. Because Jesus is telling us then about, yes, we must love thy neighbor, but let's define and be clear about who is our neighbor. Our neighbor is not just the person that lives next door. It's not just the person who drives the same kind of car we drive, or their kids are at the same school that we're at, or they share the same zip code we do. No. We learn and know everybody is our neighbor, including that man by the side of the road who may be afflicted, who may have been rejected, who may be someone who has experienced harm. And what our God teaches us through the teachings of Christ is that if we are going to be true to what we know, which is that we are all God's children, then that's how we define our neighbor. And that might be that refugee who is trying to leave one of the murder capitals of the world. It might be that brother and sister from the Bahamas who are trying to come over on a ferry with their child who is a toddler and should not be rejected. It may be that senior who right now is trying to decide whether they can afford to fill their prescription or fill their refrigerator. It might be that person who we know is looking at the fact that our children have to go to school each day and endure these drills where they're learning about gun violence and they're experiencing trauma when they should be learning. It is about us standing up and saying always that to be true to our faith and live our faith, we must lift up everyone, knowing that is the strength God gave us. And to be true to our faith and to live through the teachings of Christ, it is about who we lift up, knowing everybody is our neighbor and we are all God's children. And I thank you all, everybody, for the work that you do here at this church. It's extraordinary work that you do in service. And thank you for this moment. God bless. Thank you.
And I'm glad that you're here today for our young people too. Amen. God bless you.
Now we will have a selection by the Sunbeam Choir, followed by the introduction of speaker by Rajay Bradley.